Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. As Russia intensifies its ballistic missile campaign against Ukraine, Kyiv faces an increasingly urgent challenge: how to defend its cities with a dwindling supply of Patriot interceptors. At the same time, uncertainty over US military support is raising new questions about Ukraine's long-term air defense strategy. Joining us is Reuben F. Johnson. He's Research Fellow at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Reuben, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Great pleasure as always. So, clearly a major vulnerability in Ukraine's defense. Ukrainian cities are getting missiles lobbed at them in, hundreds a night sometimes, or dozens a night at least. And Ukraine doesn't have any defenses against them. Very worrying, all this. What can Ukraine do?
Well, I could talk for 2 hours on this. I've been writing about it all week. But there's a couple of things. One is that, this has been talked about in detail, it's been written about in detail by Admiral Mark Montgomery at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He had an article on this subject in the Washington Post. And we need to stop trying to shoot down arrows, and we need to kill the archers. And that means that you take the F-16s that Ukraine has and you very quickly adapt them to use this new low-cost, 300-mile ranged air-launched munition called the ERAM, that's ERAM, and you start taking out the launchers. You take out the launchers before the missiles get launched, because whatever we're talking about doing now, about letting Ukraine build its own missiles, having a new, cheaper to build, easier to build interceptor missile, we're not going to see any of that for 2 years. Okay, that's so far in the future you can't even see it. So there has to be a change in strategy. That's number one.
Okay, can I just clarify a couple of things with you, Reuben? First is, they already have the ERAM. Do they have the ERAM missiles? And if they do, why aren't they already doing what you just suggested?
Okay, well, here is the problem, sir. They have the ERAMs, but right now they're only integrated onto the Russian-built aircraft or the Russian-design airplanes. The Mikoyan MiG-29s, the Sukhoi 27s. They're only integrated on those older aircraft, and those older aircraft, you have to load the target set, the target coordinates, while you're still on the ground. Once you take off, you cannot change them because the electronic infrastructure of those aircraft don't permit you to do that. And going after these launchers, it's a search and destroy game. You've got to be able to load new target coordinates while you're in the air. You have to update the target set. Only the F-16s can do that, but they don't have the necessary software right now, and they need new weapons pylons. Now, this could take just a matter of weeks instead of the 2 years it's going to take to build new missiles. But someone has to punch the green button and say, go do it. And I know there are discussions, but these things seem to never happen fast enough.
No, well, that's true enough, Reuben. But the other challenge, of course, is that these missile launchers are mobile, so they can, they get to a place, they fire, they leave. Very difficult to pin them down long enough to destroy them, isn't it?
Well, it's not if you can update your target coordinates while you're in the air. Everybody does what we call shoot and scoot, because if you stay in one place too long, they're going to kill you. But that's what you need. You need to be able to dynamically change your targeting data, and you need to be able to take out those launchers, because there are no defenses against these Russian missiles. And they have, remember that every time a Patriot missile is fired, an interceptor is fired at one of these incoming Russian ballistic missiles, every time that happens, the Russians are gathering data on the performance of those interceptors, and every time they're constantly updating the targeting and the maneuverability aspects of those missiles software. They make changes to the missiles terminal phase of the missile's path, the last phase before it actually hits the target, and they keep changing the trajectories so that they're near ballistic. They do a lot of things to be able to evade the Patriot system or any other missile interceptor system that's used against them. So it's whack-a-mole, as we used to call it.
Right, so it's constantly evolving and very rapidly evolving, it would seem. What about the Ukrainian Freya interceptor missile? I mean, how close is that to being put out in the field?
Not nearly close enough. I mean, this is a European project. The new, cheaper to build, easier to build Patriot missile called the ACE, that's also supposed to be a European program. But we're talking about years for these things to be available in the kind of numbers that you would need them. And this is, I will say this, I've said it before, what we're seeing now, this is what you get when you have massive procurement malpractice. We knew that this war in 2022 wasn't going to be over in 2 weeks, and yet production did not surge. There was no contract to even surge production on these missiles until this year. So you're talking about 4 years of doing nothing, continuing to build the same inadequate number of missiles. And to put it into perspective, the number of Patriot interceptors that were fired off in the first few days of the Iran-Israeli war amount to 18 months of production. It's a year and a half, because we're not making enough. We're not making enough of anything.
Right, OK. So what then about the offensive measures that Ukraine can take? In other words, to actually fire missiles at the facilities that manufacture the Russian ballistic missiles and other logistics and whatever else that supports this whole destructive strategy the Russians are following.
That is correct. And that's precisely what they're working on. I mean, President Zelensky has announced that they have tested successfully a drone with a 3,000-kilometer range, and that next year they'll have one with a 10,000-kilometer range. So, and this is as important from a strategic aspect as it is psychologically, that the Russians have always relied on strategic depth. They've always had places in their country where they could secure certain facilities or certain assets, and they were not touchable. There's going to be no place in Russia that the Ukrainians can't hit. But can they hit enough of these facilities? And part of the problem, again, this is President Zelensky pointed this out the other day, a significant portion of the Russian missile industry is still not under sanctions. And they're producing stuff every day that goes into these ballistic missiles, which are killing people every night. Every day, it's a handful of people. It's become, I think, people have almost become numb to it. It just happens all the time. It's not news anymore, but it's horrendous. It's horrific, the stuff that we're seeing.
But how is that possible, Reuben? I mean, you know, one would have thought that with all 21 sanctions packages, for goodness sake, you'd have thought that missile components would be included somewhere in there.
Well, I'm going to quote the great Garry Kasparov, who had an article yesterday, I believe it was, in the Telegraph, an editorial. And he said flat out, he says, look at the sanctions package and look at all of the different little tiny details. It looks like something like a divorce between two people fighting over, you know, who gets the most forks and knives and spoons or something. There are all these cutouts. For example, you know, there is the sable fur industry has been preserved because certain EU members buy a lot of them. And Greece is still going to be able, under the sanctions package, to export Russian liquid natural gas, and so on and so on. It's just every time you deal with something that involves the EU, there's always loopholes. There's always exceptions. There's always these cutouts. And this has just got to stop. I mean, this is why, and the title of Kasparov's article, and he's absolutely right, he says Putin doesn't take Europe seriously anymore. They don't act like a block of nations that realizes that Russia is declared war on them. Russia's at war with them. There's no nice way to say it. And until people start acting that way, acting appropriately in response, we're never going to see the end.
All right, well, let's hope that people open their eyes sooner rather than later. Reuben Johnson, thank you, as always, for your analysis and sharing it with our audience. Have a good day.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.